The untouchable queen bee of our campus chased me down like a Category 5 hurricane for 2 whole years, all just to finally make me hers. But right when we promised to meet the parents and tie the knot after graduation, reality hit me like a truck. I caught her giggling, intimately helping her first love try on wedding suits. In a fit of absolute, soul-crushing rage, I completely ghosted her and dumped her straight into the shadow realm. And on my way out, I conveniently nabbed our dog as a parting souvenir. But who in their right mind would have thought? 3 years later, she parachutes out of nowhere to become my ultimate boss lady. And even more unexpectedly, on exactly the 5th day of our so-called grand reunion, she literally called the cops and had me arrested. Inside the overly air-conditioned mediation room of the downtown police station, the chilling AC was blasting at maximum speed. A lawyer dressed in an ultra-sharp suit slammed a massive stack of documents onto the table right in front of me. His tone was ice-cold and strictly business. "Mr. Vance, these are the bank transaction records from exactly 3 years ago when CEO Sterling purchased the purebred golden retriever, along with the dog's vaccination booklet and microchip registration info. In the eyes of the law, this dog officially and legally belongs to Miss Seraphina Sterling." I just kept my head down, rubbing the silky neck of the golden retriever nestled in my arms with extra, desperate force. Waffles seemed to sense the terrible vibes, whimpering softly as he licked the back of my hand. I looked up. Golden retrievers all look exactly the same. What gives you the right to say this one is yours? My voice was drier than a desert, carrying the heavy hoarseness of a broken guy who hadn't slept a single wink all night. Sitting directly across from me, Seraphina Sterling finally lifted her gorgeous but freezing eyes to look at me. 3 years unseen, and she had completely shed all her youthful innocence. Dressed in a ridiculously expensive designer power suit, she looked utterly unreachable. Her perfect red lips parted slightly, and her voice was as dead cold as absolute zero. Behind Waffles' left ear, there is a dark red birthmark, the exact size of a coin. The mediating officer walked right over, flipped open Waffles' ear, took one long look, and sighed heavily. "Mr. Vance, the physical features are an absolute perfect match. According to strict protocol, you have to return this dog to its rightful owner." My entire body instantly stiffened, my heart doing a wildly painful backflip. 3 years ago, Seraphina chased me with explosive, undeniable passion for 2 straight years. But just on the very day I had finally saved up enough cash and was ready to propose to her, I stood outside a stark white hospital ward, watching with my very own eyes as she intimately hugged her, freshly returned from abroad, first love, Lucius Davenport. I didn't scream like a maniac. I didn't even make a toxic scene. I just quietly packed my bags overnight and got the heck out of Dodge. The absolute only thing I took with me was Waffles, the sweet dog we had raised together. I honestly thought our paths would never cross again in this cursed lifetime. But who could have possibly guessed? 3 years later, my company got aggressively bought out, and the newly appointed, parachuted-in female CEO turned out to be her. Fine. I took a massive, shaky deep breath, forcibly swallowing the bitter sourness burning behind my eyes. I let go of the leash. She bought the dog. I am giving him back. A sudden flash of pure, unadulterated shock crossed Seraphina's eyes, almost as if she completely didn't expect me to give in so painlessly. She bent down gracefully, clapping her hands together. "Waffles, come here, boy." Waffles, who was previously glued to my thigh like living Velcro, heard that deeply familiar voice, froze for a solid second, and then, wagging his tail like a crazy helicopter propeller, threw himself right into Seraphina's waiting embrace. He rubbed his fluffy, golden face so affectionately against hers. My eye sockets instantly turned aggressively, painfully red. I gritted my teeth and bitterly muttered, "You little ungrateful traitor, I practically raised you for 3 whole years, and you just waltz off with someone else the second they call you." I abruptly stood up, utterly refusing to look at the happy girl and dog duo for even a millisecond. I marched straight toward the exit door. "Am I legally allowed to leave now?" "Halt." Seraphina's brutally frosty voice echoed behind my back. "Caelen Vance, you will return all of Waffles' belongings to me as well." My footsteps violently hit the brakes. I clenched my fists so tight, my fingernails practically dug straight into my own flesh. "I'll just call a same-city courier to drop them off later today." "No need. I will personally go with you to fetch them." Seraphina picked up the dog, strutting right past me in her designer high heels, leaving behind a lingering trail of cold, ridiculously expensive perfume. I absolutely refused to sit in her flashy Maybach. I scanned a cheap shared bicycle and pedaled my miserable way back to my dingy, rundown rented apartment. But by the time I reached the downstairs area, Seraphina was somehow already standing in front of the rusty building gate, just waiting for me. Waffles was doing happy little spins at her feet, acting like he totally knew he was finally moving back into a luxury mega mansion. I walked right past her, stone-faced, without uttering a single, pathetic syllable. I went upstairs, unlocked my door, and frantically stuffed every single thing belonging to Waffles into 2 hilariously oversized woven bags. The leash, the chewed-up toys, his absolute favorite squeaky little dinosaur plushie, and that old dog bed we had painstakingly stitched together by hand back in our happier days. I lugged the 2 massive, heavy bags downstairs and slammed them aggressively onto the ground right in front of Seraphina, kicking up a dramatic cloud of street dust. It is all right here. My eyes were practically glowing red with unshed tears, my voice trembling but freezing cold. I know CEO Sterling is worth over 100 million now, and probably looks down on this pile of junk, but Waffles is a timid boy who needs his own bed. Wait until he gets used to the new mansion. Then you can toss this stuff in the trash. Seraphina stared into my bloodshot eyes, her breathing suddenly hitching in her throat. She opened her mouth like she desperately wanted to say something. Caelen Vance, just take your dog. I cut her off cold, with zero politeness. I turned my back on her and was just about to slam the building's heavy iron gate shut when a pale, slender hand suddenly shot out, wildly jamming itself into the gap of the door. Caelen Vance, do you really have to calculate things so ruthlessly with me? Seraphina bit her perfect red lip, a flicker of genuine grievance actually flashing across her eyes. I was so unbelievably furious, I actually laughed out loud. Wasn't it CEO Sterling who brought the literal police to calculate things with me first? What's wrong? Trying to play the deep, emotional card now? Listen to me, Seraphina Sterling. The very last shred of connection between us has officially been snapped. From now on, outside of work-related matters, do not appear in my line of sight. I slammed the door shut with the force of a hurricane, completely blocking her out. Leaning heavily against the freezing iron, listening to the sharp clicking of her high heels fading away, followed by the roaring ignition of her fancy sports car, my emotional dam finally broke. I slid slowly down the cold metal panel until I hit the absolute rock bottom of the floor. Covering my face, massive teardrops smashed against the tiles. These past 3 years, I worked myself to the absolute bone, forcing my brain to never think about her. Waffles was my absolute only emotional anchor in this world. And now, I am officially left with absolutely nothing. Monday morning rolled around, and I strolled into the CEO's office looking like a guy who had exactly zero trauma. As the CEO's executive assistant, my professional etiquette strictly forbade me from dragging personal baggage into the workplace. CEO Sterling, here is your itinerary for today. You have a senior management meeting at 10 a.m., and you are meeting CEO Wang of Grand Group at 2 p.m. sharp. I handed over the fancy leather folder, my tone as flat as a pancake. Seraphina was massaging her temples. There were faint, bruised dark circles under her eyes, clearly indicating her weekend was anything but restful. Just leave it there. She stared at me, her gaze a tangled, agonizing mess of complexity. Caelen Vance, you blocked me on WeChat. CEO Sterling, work matters can be communicated via the Enterprise app or email. In private? I don't believe we have any necessity to keep in touch, I replied, maintaining an unbreakable poker face. Seraphina aggressively slammed her expensive fountain pen onto the mahogany desk. Caelen Vance, you raised Waffles for 3 solid years. Are you seriously so cold-blooded that you can just toss him aside like he's nothing to you? I looked directly into her eyes, flashing her a highly sarcastic, bitter smirk. CEO Sterling is mistaken. That dog was bought by you in the first place. These past 3 years? Just consider it time I stole. After dropping that mic, I turned around and marched right out of the office, without a single trace of nostalgia. For the following entire week, I took the concept of strictly business to an absolute god-tier level. No matter what weird excuses Seraphina used to test the waters, I remained as warm and responsive as a frozen brick. That was, until right before quitting time on Friday. Seraphina abruptly summoned me into her office and slid a sticky note across the desk. I'm flying out to Europe for a week-long business trip, starting next week. Waffles has been on a hunger strike to protest. The nanny at home absolutely cannot handle him. Seraphina looked at me, her tone carrying a microscopic, desperate hint of pleading. This is the address and passcode to my private villa. You will go there for 2 hours every day after work, just to keep him company. I was fully prepared to ruthlessly reject her on the spot. But hearing the words, hunger strike, my heart still violently squeezed itself into a knot. That was my Waffles, after all. Does this count as overtime pay? I asked, with icy detachment. Seraphina looked like she was going to choke on her own sheer anger. It counts. Triple pay. The weekend finally arrived, and I took a cab to Seraphina's standalone mansion in the ultra-rich district. I punched in the passcode and stepped inside the massive foyer. I had barely yelled the word, Waffles, before a golden furball launched itself like an artillery shell from the corner of the living room, straight into my chest. Whimper, whimper, whimper. Waffles frantically licked my face, making the most pitiful, dramatic sobbing sounds from deep within his throat. His normally chubby, adorable body had legitimately shrunk by a whole size. My heart shattered as I hugged him tight, gently smoothing his golden fur. Just as I was about to go find him some food, a set of obnoxiously frivolous footsteps echoed from the grand staircase. Oh my! Isn't this Assistant Caelen? You really are just like a dog, coming exactly when called, huh? I snapped my head up, my eyes instantly dropping to sub-zero temperatures. Lucius Davenport was standing there wearing fancy silk pajamas, holding a snobby coffee cup, and looking down at me from his high ground with absolute contempt. 3 years ago, this absolute piece of garbage effortlessly snatched away the girl I treated like a literal goddess. And now, he had the nerve to shamelessly move right into Seraphina's house. Mr. Davenport, I am here on official orders from CEO Sterling to take care of Waffles. If you find me to be an eyesore, feel free to lock yourself in your room. I stood up tall, shielding Waffles safely behind my legs. Lucius just let out a villainous sneer, sauntering down the stairs. His gaze turned entirely toxic as he glared at Waffles. It's just a filthy animal. Seraphina has wanted to throw it out for ages. The only reason she kept it is because it's somewhat useful as bait to hook you in. He suddenly took a massive step forward, violently grabbed Waffles by the collar, and yanked him roughly toward the door. Nanny, bring me the leash. I'm taking this stupid mutt out for a walk. Waffles was so terrified he struggled frantically, his claws scraping against the hardwood floor with an ear-piercing screech. What the hell are you doing? Let him go, I roared, lunging forward to wrestle the dog away. But Lucius violently shoved me back, laughing with pure, twisted malice. Caelen Vance, recognize your pathetic status. You are nothing but a piece of trash that Seraphina got bored of and tossed away. And now, this dog is my toy, too. He forcibly dragged Waffles, stomping out of the villa's massive front doors. My heart burning with pure anxiety, I chased right out after them. The villa community was absolutely gargantuan, and the backyard connected directly to a seemingly bottomless artificial lake. I trailed them from a distance, and the longer I watched, the more incredibly wrong it felt. Lucius wasn't walking the dog at all. He was repeatedly using the tip of his expensive leather shoes to viciously kick Waffles right in the stomach. Waffles yelped endlessly in pain, but because the leash was choking his neck with an iron grip, he couldn't escape at all. Lucius Davenport, are you out of your freaking mind? My eyes saw completely red. I sprinted toward him like an Olympic runner. Hearing my voice, Lucius stopped dead in his tracks. By now, he had walked right out onto the lake's wooden viewing platform. Directly beneath his feet was the bone-chilling, freezing lake water. He turned his head around, watching me panting heavily, as the smile on his face twisted into something truly demonic. Caelen Vance, weren't you so absolutely heartbroken over this dog? Don't you pride yourself on being such a deep, devoted lover? Lucius suddenly yanked the leash up with all his might, hoisting the nearly 100-pound golden retriever halfway into thin air. Waffles let out a shriek of pure despair, his 4 paws kicking helplessly at the sky. You want him? Fine. Go fish him out of the water. With a violent thrust of his arm, he literally launched Waffles right into the freezing lake. Splash! A massive geyser of water erupted. Waffles was naturally terrified of water, and he began thrashing like a complete maniac on the surface. The tragic sound of the dog's howling shredded the peaceful evening silence. Waffles. My eyes nearly ripped out of their sockets. My brain went totally blank. Without even taking off my shoes, I took a flying leap, diving headfirst right into the bone-piercing water. The early spring lake water sliced at my skin like 1,000 invisible blades. I swam toward Waffles, like my very life depended on it. And right at the exact millisecond, I finally grabbed Waffles' collar. The absolute psycho on the shore, Lucius, suddenly picked up a massive landscaping cobblestone. With a wildly venomous look in his eyes, he aimed right for my head. "Caelen Vance, why don't you and this dog just perish together?" The massive rock plummeted down, howling through the wind. But at that exact same moment, a black Maybach smashed through the lakeside barrier like a completely possessed beast. The ear-splitting screech of the brakes echoed through the night sky. Bam! In the absolute nick of time, I violently jerked my head to the side. That gigantic cobblestone grazed my temple and smashed into the water, the resulting water column instantly swallowing me whole. An explosive pain radiated from my forehead. Warm crimson fluid flowed right into my eyes, instantly dyeing my entire field of vision with a dramatic red filter. But I hugged Waffles with a death grip, using the water's buoyancy to paddle desperately toward the opposite bank. Up on the shore, the Maybach's door was kicked open with brutal force. Seraphina, who was supposed to be on a business trip in Europe, literally crawled and scrambled out of the car. She had run so fast, she even lost one of her high heels. Her obscenely expensive trench coat was totally smeared in mud. Looking completely unhinged, she sprinted toward the viewing platform. "Lucius, what the hell are you doing?" Seraphina's piercing scream was packed with disbelief and absolute sheer panic. Lucius clearly hadn't calculated that Seraphina would return to the country early. His face lost all its color in a microsecond. He stumbled backward in a total panic. "Seraphina, listen to me, I can explain. This dog bit me first. And Caelen Vance, he attacked me. Get out of my way." Seraphina didn't even waste a single, pathetic glance on him. She shoved Lucius out of the way with zero hesitation and plunged straight into the waist-deep water. Reaching out to me, she screamed, "Caelen Vance, give me your hand. Hurry." Her voice was totally shattered, barely recognizable. Hot tears mixed with freezing lake water, completely plastering her face. I gritted my teeth, burning through the absolute last ounce of energy in my body to heave a violently shivering Waffles up onto the muddy shore. But between the massive blood loss and total exhaustion, my vision instantly went pitch black. My body sank like a heavy brick, plunging straight toward the bottom of the lake. In that absolute final second, before my eyes clamped shut, I felt a pair of trembling hands grab my collar with a vice-like grip. A voice, totally choked with absolute despair, exploded right next to my eardrum. "Caelen Vance, if you dare to die on me, I swear I'll drag this dog down to the underworld just to keep you company." Gasping, I violently snapped my eyes open. The blinding, harsh glare of the hospital's fluorescent lights stabbed right through my pupils. Raising a shaky hand to my face, I felt a thick, heavy layer of gauze completely wrapping my forehead. The stitched-up gash throbbed mercilessly, feeling like 10,000 steel needles were throwing a wild party inside my skull. I could feel warm liquid slowly seeping out from the edges of the bandage. Suddenly, a faint, pitiful whimpering sound drifted up from the side of the bed. I slowly turned my head. A completely soaked Waffles was resting his little chin right on the edge of the mattress. His normally majestic golden fur was matted into pathetic, wet clumps, still going, drip, drop, drip, drop. Seeing me finally wake up, Waffles heavily lifted one of his front paws, placing it so gently on the back of my hand. His warm tongue licked my knuckles while his throat let out the most heartbreaking, soft little cries. Ignoring the intense spinning vertigo, I reached out and gently rubbed his wet head. "It's over now, buddy. You're safe, Waffles." My voice was incredibly dry. It honestly felt like I had just swallowed an entire bucket of sand. A massive wave of pure relief washed over my chest. We actually survived that nightmare. But then bang, the VIP hospital room door was shoved open with brutal force, smashing against the drywall with an explosive crash. Seraphina furiously stomped in, her sharp high heels clicking aggressively against the floor tiles. She had already changed into a sharp, intimidating black power suit. The look in her eyes was so cold, her eyebrows were practically dripping with frost. Trailing right behind her were two stern, fully uniformed police officers. And bringing up the rear was a cowering emergency room doctor, wearing a white coat and gold-rimmed glasses. Seraphina marched right up to my bed, looking down at me like an absolute, ruthless monarch. Her eyes were swirling with a chaotic storm of complex emotions. There was shock. There was blazing, fiery fury. But there was absolutely zero trace of worry for me. She completely and utterly ignored the blood-soaked gauze on my forehead, totally blind to the fact that my face was as pale as a fresh sheet of printer paper. "Caelen Vance, you're awake," she stated coldly, violently slapping a few thin sheets of paper onto my hospital bed. The papers scattered, revealing a blindingly red official medical seal. "Lucius's injury assessment report is officially out. severe concussion, 3 fractured ribs, and massive soft tissue contusions. Seriously, what kind of absolute psychotic episode were you having? I furrowed my brows, glancing down at that utterly ridiculous report. Wait, I didn't even touch a single thread of Lucius's clothes. Where the hell did that slimy bastard get a concussion and broken bones from? Right then, the cowering emergency room doctor with the gold-rimmed glasses suddenly stepped forward. He cleared his throat, slapping on this totally fake mask of righteous justice. Officers, I was the attending physician at the time, and I am also a direct eyewitness. The crooked doctor pointed his finger right at my nose, speaking with absolute, disgusting conviction. I just so happened to be taking a stroll by the lake, and I saw with my own 2 eyes. This man went completely rabid, acting like a literal mad dog. He held Mr. Davenport underwater with brutal, deadly force. Mr. Davenport struggled for his life, but this maniac only intensified his cruelty. He literally attempted to drown Mr. Davenport alive. If CEO Sterling hadn't arrived exactly in the nick of time, Mr. Davenport would already be zipped up in a body bag. I stared right at that corrupt doctor, my gaze colder than the ice in Antarctica. Just how much dirty money did Lucius stuff into your greedy pockets? I snarled. For you to dare come in here and spew absolute, fabricated garbage. The doctor's face instantly changed colors. Looking extremely guilty and pathetic, he hid behind the cops. You're spitting toxic lies. Everything I just said is the absolute truth. The police officer's face darkened. He stepped forward, issuing a harsh, stern warning. Watch your language, buddy. Right now, we have both a credible witness and hard physical evidence. Lucius Davenport is currently lying in a bed in the intensive care unit. The cop knocked heavily on my metal nightstand, making a sharp, highly intimidating sound. You are officially suspected of intentional assault. We are legally summoning you for immediate interrogation. Seraphina took a deep, shaky breath, the edges of her eye sockets turning slightly red. She took 1 step forward, pointing an accusing finger at Waffles, who was terrified and cowering at my feet. Her voice actually trembled with misplaced anger. Caelen Vance, I thought you were just stubborn, but I never ever imagined you could be so incredibly toxic and vicious, all over a single stupid dog. Tell me, were you actually trying to end someone's life today? I stared at Seraphina's perfectly sculpted face. 3 years ago, I walked away from a multi-billion-dollar family inheritance just for her, willingly choosing to be an absolute nobody. 3 years later, for the sake of a two-faced hypocrite who smashed my head with a rock and nearly drowned my dog, she brought the literal police to lock me up. Lucius was just playing a harmless joke on you, and you actually unleashed this kind of lethal violence on him. Seraphina bit her perfect red lip, her face painted with ultimate disappointment. You disgust me to my core. Playing a joke? Stringing up a 100-pound dog and smashing it into a frozen lake, smashing my skull with a boulder. That is what you call a joke? I looked at Seraphina. Those eyes of hers, which used to hold nothing but me, were now blindingly biased toward her precious first love. 3 years of complete, absolute devotion ultimately could not compete with a single fake tear from her beloved golden boy. I suddenly burst out laughing. The laughter vibrated straight out of my chest, getting louder and louder, echoing harshly in the spacious, sterile hospital room. What are you laughing at? Seraphina got totally spooked by my manic laughter. Taking a half step back, I killed the smile instantly, my gaze sweeping over her face, like I was looking at a complete stranger. Seraphina Sterling, you are truly pathetic. I gave Waffles' head a little pat. Even a dog knows to bark twice when someone bites it. You are honestly worse than a dog. Seraphina was trembling with absolute rage. She raised her hand, fully intending to slap the living daylights out of me. I stared at her with ice in my veins, not even bothering to dodge. Seraphina's hand froze in midair. Eventually, she dropped it with a look of pure hatred. Enough nonsense. The police officer pulled out a pair of highly reflective silver handcuffs, stepping right up to me. Caelen Vance, we are now officially placing you under criminal detention. Come with us. I didn't resist. I threw off the blanket and got out of bed. Because I had lost way too much blood, my body swayed dramatically for a second. Waffles immediately used his furry body to prop up my calf, barking furiously at the police. Quiet, boy. I patted Waffles' back, turning my head to look at the cops. I need to use the restroom and change into dry clothes. Give me 5 minutes. The cops exchanged a look and nodded. Do it in the room's bathroom. Don't try any funny business. I turned and walked right into the VIP suite's private bathroom, shut the door, locked it, completely cutting off their line of sight. The calmness on my face was instantly replaced by a blizzard of absolute, freezing wrath. I peeled off the soaking wet hospital gown, reached deep into the inner lining of my undergarments, and ripped open a waterproof sealed pouch. Inside was a solid black, custom-made phone with 0 brand logos on it. It had been 3 years. For 3 years, for Seraphina's sake, I willingly buried my true identity as the sole heir to the ultimate mega corporation, the Vance family of the capital city. I played the role of a hard-working, pathetic simp, swallowing every single eye roll and mockery thrown my way. But now, this ridiculous circus was officially over. Since reasoning with them was a spectacular failure, it was finally time to speak the language of absolute power. I hit the power button. The screen flared to life, skipping every normal boot-up protocol and going straight into a highly encrypted dialing interface. With pure muscle memory, I punched in a chaotic 16-digit code. The phone rang exactly once before it was picked up. From the receiver came an elderly but incredibly powerful voice, carrying a frantic excitement he couldn't even try to hide. "Hello? Is this the young master? Barnaby, it is me." I stared at my bleeding forehead in the mirror, my voice as cold as a glacier. "Young master, it truly is you." The voice on the other end instantly spiked an octave, so wildly excited, he was stammering. "You finally reached out to this old servant. The master and madam have been searching for you so desperately." Barnaby sounded like he was actually about to cry. "Young master, you are finally willing to utilize the family's power. Investigate the entire background of Lucius Davenport and an emergency room doctor at the City No. 1 hospital. I want their reputations burned to the absolute ground. Also, notify the capital city. The Crown Prince of the Vance family is making his return." I turned on the faucet. "This old servant obeys your command." Barnaby's voice instantly morphed into something carrying lethal intent. "Young master, within 3 minutes, I will make this hospital change its official last name to Vance. Within 5 minutes, I will ensure every single asset under Lucius Davenport's name hits 0. I am dispatching the Royal Medical Team to retrieve you immediately. Within 10 minutes, I will make this entire city realize exactly who the true sky above them really is." I hung up the phone, stashed the custom device safely back against my body, splashed cold water on my face, yanked a towel to dry off, and pushed open the bathroom door. I marched out with massive, dominating strides. Seraphina stood by the window, aggressively tapping her designer watch with a look of pure, toxic impatience. The cops stood guard at the door, gripping their handcuffs like they were about to take down a supervillain. "Why does changing clothes take so damn long?" she snapped. "Let's move," the cop barked impatiently. I completely ignored him, walking straight over to the hospital bed to gently pick up my dog, Waffles. Right at that exact millisecond, a violently massive gust of wind erupted outside the window. The deafening, explosive roar of helicopter propellers ripped the night sky in half. The intense air pressure made the glass windows vibrate so violently, it looked like they were going to shatter into a million pieces at any second. Seraphina snapped her head around in total shock, as the hurricane-force winds absolutely ruined her perfect hair. Her eyes bulged out of her head, and her face was painted with utter, mind-blown disbelief. 3 pitch-black, heavy-duty military helicopters were literally hovering right outside the hospital building. Blindingly bright searchlight beams pierced through the darkness, aiming directly and exclusively at the window of my hospital room. Out in the hallway, a chaotic stampede of footsteps suddenly erupted, accompanied by heavy panting and frantic screaming. The hospital room doors were violently smashed open once again. It was the director of the city's No. 1 hospital. He had actually thrown his white coat on inside out, leading a dozen high-ranking hospital executives who were sweating like fountains. They jammed themselves into the room. The director completely ignored the cops, and a jaw-dropped Seraphina. He rushed straight up to me and dropped to both knees with a loud thud, his entire body shaking like a leaf in a hurricane. His voice cracked wildly. Young Master Vance, we arrived too late. Please, punish us." Seraphina's eyes went as wide as saucers. Her meticulously maintained face twisted into a mask of pure, unadulterated shock. She froze for a few seconds, then suddenly exploded into a piercing, hysterical laugh. "Caelen Vance, have you completely lost your mind? How much money did you spend to hire these actors? You even dared to hire someone to impersonate the hospital director. Are you that desperate to go to prison?" Seraphina pointed a manicured finger at the director on the floor, her face full of sheer disgust. The cops were totally confused, too. They stepped forward, fully intending to pull the director off the floor, but the director violently slapped the cop's hands away. He spun around and delivered a gloriously crisp, resounding pimp slap right across the face of that bribed doctor. The sharp smack echoed dramatically throughout the room. I didn't bother paying attention to this absolute circus. I just reached out and gently rubbed Waffles' soggy head. "Let's go, officers. Weren't you taking me to the station?" "I am fully cooperating with your investigation." I voluntarily held up both my hands, my tone terrifyingly calm. Since they wanted to play a dangerous game, then let's go to the police station and blow this situation up to astronomical proportions. Police sirens wailed, speeding all the way into the downtown police station. Seraphina drove that Maybach, tailing closely behind us. Inside the mediation room, the fluorescent lights gave off a miserable, sterile white glow. Seraphina sat across from me, arms crossed, acting like she was the queen of the universe. "Caelen Vance, stop fighting a losing battle. Sign this confession paper, hand over the dog, and for the sake of our past 3 years, I will beg Lucius to let you off the hook." I just leaned back in my chair and closed my eyes to rest, too lazy to even spare her a single glance. Suddenly, an ear-shattering screech of brakes ripped through the night. Even the ground started to vibrate like a mini earthquake. Rumble. 10 consecutive, custom black Rolls-Royce Phantoms, looking like a pack of steel monsters tearing through the darkness, brutally smashed right through the police station's retractable front gates, bringing with them the aggressive smell of burning rubber. The 10 cars slammed on their brakes in a perfect fan formation, completely and totally blockading the main entrance. Not even a literal fly could escape. The car doors swung open in perfect unison, moving with terrifying military precision. 30 bodyguards, all standing at a terrifying 6'2" and dressed in sharp black suits, poured out. Lining up flawlessly on both sides, the door of the center Rolls-Royce opened. The absolute top-tier, #1 elite lawyer in the entire country, Thaddeus, carrying a pitch-black premium briefcase, marched into the main hall with giant, confident strides. "Who dares to touch Mr. Vance?" Thaddeus let out a booming roar so packed with authority that the glass windows literally buzzed in response. Seraphina violently shot up from her chair, all the color instantly draining from her face. "Top lawyer, Thaddeus? Why on earth would you be in a place like this?" Seraphina's tone suddenly carried a pathetic, desperate hint of flattery. But Thaddeus treated her like she was completely invisible. He marched straight up to me and delivered an incredibly deep bow. "Mr. Vance, I apologize for my tardiness." I opened my eyes, casually rolling my wrists. "Did you bring the stuff?" "Everything is fully prepared, boss." Thaddeus spun around, ripped open his briefcase, and aggressively slammed a massive stack of documents onto the interrogation desk. "This is the financial transaction record, proving Lucius Davenport hired offshore hackers to illegally alter the artificial lake's security footage." He whipped out a single sheet of paper, slapping it right under the detectives' noses. "This is the bank transfer record, proving the ear specialist at City #1 Hospital accepted $500,000 in hush money from Lucius Davenport." He pulled out yet another document, slamming it down like a heavy gavel. "And this one is the complete, unbroken chain of evidence proving Lucius completely faked his severe injury assessment. 3 pieces of absolute, ironclad proof, black ink on white paper. The blindingly red official seals practically burned into everyone's retinas." The investigating officers simultaneously sucked in a sharp breath of cold air. They immediately grabbed the files and started frantically reviewing them. Seraphina's face turned white as a sheet, and she violently snatched up the bank transfer record. "Impossible. Lucius is still in the ICU. How could he possibly have done all this?" I let out a dark, mocking chuckle, standing up and casually fixing the collar of my messy hospital gown. "The ICU? Seriously, Seraphina? Why don't you go check on your beloved company right now and see exactly what your precious Lucius is really up to?" I shifted my cold gaze to the cops. "Officers, am I free to go now?" The officers nodded like bobbleheads, rushing over to personally unlock my shiny silver bracelets. "Mr. Vance, you may leave whenever you please. We will immediately apply for an arrest warrant for Lucius Davenport." I scooped up Waffles and marched out of the police station doors like an absolute boss. Thaddeus trailed closely behind, respectfully pulling open the rear door of the waiting Rolls-Royce. I slid into the luxurious leather seat, my eyes burning with a murderous glare. To the Sterling Group. The motorcade roared to life, tearing through the city streets like a jagged streak of black lightning. Meanwhile, at the Sterling Group headquarters, top-floor executive boardroom, the massive doors were tightly sealed shut. From inside, Lucius's obnoxiously passionate voice could be heard echoing. Esteemed colleagues, CEO Sterling has recently fallen ill. All company affairs, big and small, are temporarily under my absolute jurisdiction. Lucius was lounging comfortably in the grand CEO chair, sporting a hilariously pathetic bandage wrapped around his head. That piece of land in the South District. I have already negotiated a massive $1 billion investment deal. The second those funds hit our accounts, every single person sitting in this room will see their year-end bonuses doubled. Thunderous applause erupted inside the boardroom. I stood just outside the doors, listening to their pathetic cheering, and smirked with pure, icy mockery. I raised my right leg and delivered a devastating kick dead center into the heavy, solid wood double doors. The two doors let out a tragic shriek, collapsing inward with an explosive crash that kicked up a massive storm of dust and splinters. The entire boardroom was instantly plunged into a dead silence. Every single executive snapped their heads around, staring at the doorway in absolute horror. There I stood, dressed in a freshly tailored, ultra-premium black suit, one hand casually stuffed in my pocket. I stepped right over the splintered ruins of the door and strolled inside. Right behind me, Thaddeus and 30 elite bodyguards formed an impenetrable wall of black suits, instantly taking complete hostage of the entire room. Lucius shot up out of his chair like he had seen a literal ghost. Caelen Vance? How the hell did you get out? Security? Where the hell did security go and die? I completely ignored his pathetic, impotent rage. I strolled right up to the massive conference table, snatched the remote control, and slammed the one-touch screencast button. The gigantic LCD screen flickered to life. The fully restored, ultra-high-definition, unedited security footage retrieved by my elite hackers began playing instantly for the whole room to witness. In the video, Lucius's face was twisted like a demon's as he yanked violently on Waffles' leash. He used his expensive leather shoes to viciously kick the poor dog's stomach. Waffles' tragic, agonizing screams echoed loudly throughout the dead silent boardroom. Next, he hoisted Waffles into the air and launched him straight into the freezing lake. As I dove into the water to save my dog, Lucius grabbed a gargantuan cobblestone, aimed it dead center at the back of my head, and hurled it down. Caelen Vance, why don't you and this stupid mutt just perish together? In the crystal clear video, Lucius's venomous, psychotic cursing was undeniably loud. The entire room erupted into chaos. The executives looked at each other, totally horrified. The way they looked at Lucius was now packed with utter terror and sheer disgust. This was literally attempted murder, caught in flat-out 4K. Lucius's face turned the color of dead ash. His legs turned to absolute jelly, and he collapsed right back into the CEO chair. He pointed a shaking finger at the screen, his voice quivering violently. Fake. That's AI generated. Caelen Vance, you're framing me, I replied coldly. Whether it's a frame job or not, you can take that up with the police. The second the words left my mouth, a chaotic stampede of heavy footsteps echoed from the hallway. Fully geared SWAT officers smashed their way into the room and aggressively tackled Lucius straight into the carpet. With a cold, metallic click, handcuffs locked his wrists behind his back. Lucius Davenport, you are under arrest for suspected attempted murder, forging evidence, and corporate embezzlement. You're coming with us. Lucius struggled like an absolute maniac, squealing like a pig heading to the slaughterhouse. Let me go. I am the acting CEO of the Sterling Group. Seraphina, save me. From the back of the crowd, a figure stumbled wildly into the room. Seraphina was drenched in cold sweat. Her meticulously perfect makeup had completely melted into a tragic mess. Her hair looked like a literal bird's nest. She stared dead at the frozen video frame on the giant screen. Her entire body was shaking uncontrollably at the sight of Lucius, the one who picked up a boulder trying to smash my skull in. That absolute demon who abused Waffles. It completely and totally shattered the rosy filter she had viewed him through for the past 3 years. Lucius, you lied to me? Seraphina's voice was completely shredded. Tears burst from her eyes like a broken dam. As Lucius was being dragged away by the cops, he passed right by Seraphina, still screaming frantically for her to save his pathetic life. But Seraphina looked like someone had vacuumed all the energy right out of her soul. She collapsed onto the floor into a pathetic, broken heap. She slowly turned her head, looking up at me completely unharmed, standing tall, and looking down at her like a god. Every single tiny detail of the past 3 years morphed into razor-sharp daggers, brutally stabbing straight through her heart. Caelen. Seraphina dropped to her knees, scraping her bare legs against the cold, hard floor. She crawled inch by inch until she reached my feet. She reached out with violently shaking hands, desperately clutching the fabric of my tailored suit pants. I was really wrong. She was crying so hard she could barely breathe. She was hyperventilating, completely stripped of her former high and mighty CEO persona. I shouldn't have doubted you. I shouldn't have shown extreme favoritism to him. I'm begging you. Please, just forgive me, okay? We can start over. I'll give you half the shares in my company. I looked down at this miserable woman I had once loved with everything I had. My heart felt absolutely nothing. Zero. I lifted my leg and ruthlessly kicked her away with absolute zero mercy. Don't touch me with your filthy hands. I took the wet wipe Thaddeus respectfully handed me, and slowly, methodically wiped down my pant leg. Half your shares, Seraphina Sterling? Do you actually think your garbage company is some kind of prized treasure? Right at that exact moment, a tragic, wailing scream echoed from the hallway. The chief financial officer literally crawled into the boardroom on all fours. He had even lost a shoe in his blind panic. He threw himself onto his knees right in front of Seraphina, tearing at his own hair and sobbing uncontrollably. CEO Sterling, it's over. We are completely finished. Seraphina froze like a statue, staring at him with empty, dead eyes. What happened? The CFO held up his tablet like it was a ticking bomb. The screen was completely bleeding red with massive negative numbers. Just moments ago, the $300 million in liquid assets on the company's public ledger was authorized via your personal secret passcode by Lucius Davenport and fully transferred to an offshore shell company. Our cash flow chain is completely, irreparably shattered. The banks have already initiated the freezing of our assets. Next month's payroll, the final payments for our suppliers, the massive breach of contract penalties for the South District project. Adding it all up, it's a colossal $1 billion black hole. These words hit Seraphina like a bolt of lightning straight from the heavens, smiting her right on the top of her skull. Her vision went completely black. She violently coughed up a mouthful of crimson blood, and her body toppled backwards, stiff as a wooden board. The boardroom instantly descended into absolute chaotic anarchy. Executives ran screaming toward the exit, frantically dialing their phones to beg for jobs at other companies. I gave the unconscious Seraphina one final icy glance, turned around, and marched out with my legion of lawyers. Sue Seraphina Sterling, I told Thaddeus, issuing orders while walking down the hall. Mental distress compensation for Waffles, my medical bills. Do not miss a single cent. I want her drowning in a mountain of debt she can never repay, and spending the rest of her miserable life operating a sewing machine behind bars. The night breeze was freezing cold down at the ground floor of the Sterling Group building. Seraphina was left lying flat on the freezing pavement. Her eyes were staring blankly up at the high ceiling like empty voids. A colossal mountain of debt. Impending prison time. After the ultimate betrayal by her first love, she had plummeted straight from the clouds into the absolute lowest, darkest pit of hell. Suddenly, the phone in her pocket buzzed violently. Seraphina snatched it like a drowning woman clinging to the very last piece of driftwood. With trembling fingers, she hit accept. A cold, completely emotionless, robotic female voice echoed through the speaker. Miss Seraphina Sterling, I am calling from the CEO's office of the Vance Corporation in the capital. The Vance family is highly interested in a total buyout of the Sterling Group, wiping clean every single dime of your massive debt. Seraphina's dead, hollow eyes instantly lit up with a blinding flash of maniacal joy. Really? I'll do it. I am willing to do absolutely anything. Excellent. The robotic voice paused for a microsecond. The tone suddenly morphed into something incredibly eerie and dark. Tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. sharp, you must arrive in person at the top floor office of the Vance Corporation headquarters. Our CEO has a very special sell your soul contract that demands your personal signature. 10 a.m. the next morning. The capital city's central business district, the absolute top floor of the Vance Corporation headquarters. I leaned back in my custom, pure black, genuine leather executive chair, toying with a solid silver fork against the bone china plate in front of me. On it rested a perfectly medium rare cut of freshly air-freighted M9 Wagyu beef. I sliced off a beautifully marbled piece and casually tossed it right up into the air. Waffles launched himself like a rocket, snatching the Wagyu mid-air and wagging his tail in absolute ecstasy. Right then, the massive mahogany double doors were forcefully pushed open. Seraphina, loudly clicking in her heels, stepped into my obnoxiously luxurious CEO office. She looked incredibly nervous and totally out of place, wearing a cheap, worn-out old suit. Her eyes were completely webbed with bloodshot veins. Her shaking hands gripped a pathetic bankruptcy restructuring proposal, like her life depended on it. The exact millisecond our eyes met, Seraphina looked like she had been struck by lightning. She froze completely solid. "Caelen Vance?" she screamed in pure shock. The proposal in her hands hit the floor with a pathetic slap. "Why the hell are you here? Do you actually have the guts to sneak into the Vance Corporation CEO's office just to steal things?" I calmly set down my silver fork and pulled out a silk handkerchief to gracefully wipe my fingertips. "Seraphina Sterling, if your brain is entirely filled with this kind of toxic waste, then the Sterling Group going bankrupt is honestly exactly what you deserve." I pressed the intercom button on my desk. "Thaddeus, get in here." In less than 10 seconds, the door swung open again. The country's undisputed #1 elite lawyer, Thaddeus, walked up to me with absolute reverent respect. He delivered a deep, 90-degree bow. "Chairman Vance, what are your orders?" "Chairman Vance." Seraphina's pupils contracted violently. Her legs turned to absolute jelly. She nearly collapsed onto the expensive carpet. That broke loser she had stepped on and humiliated for 3 straight years. The pathetic simp she had forced to walk away with absolutely nothing was actually the ultimate ruler of the capital city's top mega corporation, a man who could obliterate the Sterling Group just by twitching his finger. This was absolutely impossible. Seraphina shook her head like a maniac, tears exploding out of her eyes. I was far too lazy to enjoy her mental breakdown. I just grabbed a thick folder and slammed it onto the desk. "Sign it. The Vance Corporation will inject $1 billion and fill every single financial black hole in your company." Seraphina practically crawled and scrambled to the desk. With violently shaking hands, she flipped open the document. The second she read the terms and conditions, her face turned the color of a corpse. This wasn't a corporate injection agreement at all. This was an absolute, undisputed contract to sell her soul. The clauses explicitly stated, Seraphina Sterling must be completely stripped of her title as CEO of the Sterling Group. She must serve unconditionally as my 24/7 personal life assistant, on call every single second. Zero human dignity allowed, at my absolute beck and call. You want me to be your servant?" Seraphina bit her lips so hard, crimson fluid actually started seeping out. "If you don't want to, the door is right behind you. Have a terrible trip." I stared at her with ultimate coldness. My eyes were completely devoid of any warmth. "Today at 3 p.m., the bank will forcefully liquidate every asset the Sterling Group owns. I hope you are fully prepared to spend the rest of your natural life in a prison cell. I'll sign it." Seraphina broke down into a loud, pathetic wail. She snatched the fancy pen off the desk and scribbled her name crookedly on the signature line. I hit the call button on my desk. 2 imposing female bodyguards immediately marched in. They threw a pair of aggressively cheap black flat shoes right at Seraphina's feet. "Take off your high heels. From this exact second forward, you are no longer the high and mighty CEO Sterling. You only deserve to kneel and serve me." Seraphina squeezed her eyes shut in absolute, crushing humiliation. Massive, heavy teardrops smashed into the luxurious carpet beneath her. She bent over, stripping off those limited edition high heels that once symbolized her elite status, and shoved her bare feet into rough, cheap flats. The roles had officially reversed. The former Ice Queen had completely degenerated into the literal mud beneath my shoes. It was late night at the Vance family estate in the western hills of the capital. I held a glass of Romani Conti, standing by the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking down at the entire city's glowing skyline. Seraphina was wearing a pathetic, scratchy gray servant's uniform. Standing obediently by the door with her hands tightly clasped, she looked like absolute death warmed over. I turned around, casually flicked my wrist, and the crimson liquid spilled downward, landing with pinpoint accuracy right onto the priceless, pure white Persian rug beneath my feet. "It's dirty. Wash it clean with your bare hands." I carelessly tossed the expensive wine glass onto the sofa, where it landed with a dull, heavy thud. Seraphina abruptly shot her head up, her eyes brimming with ultimate humiliation and pure disbelief. "Caelen Vance, this has red wine all over it. Hand washing won't get this out at all. It has to be sent to a professional cleaning service." I leaned in cold, I said. "Use your hands to wash it." I cut her off with a vicious snap, my piercing gaze slicing across her pale face like a razor blade. "Do you not understand human language, or do you want to see the official bankruptcy announcement for the Sterling Group tomorrow morning?" Seraphina's entire body shuddered violently, forcing her to swallow down every single word of rebellion she had left in her. She turned and dragged herself into the massive washroom, carrying out a heavy basin of plain water, and grabbed a hard, bristled brush. The former female CEO, whose 10 perfect fingers had supposedly never even touched tap water, was now completely stripped of her untouchable image. Kneeling directly on the rug, she plunged her bare hands into the freezing water, scrubbing violently at that dark, stubborn red wine stain. The rough bristles quickly tore away the delicate skin on her soft palms, hints of fresh blood mixed with the wine water and soap suds, staining the carpet into an even more chaotic, messy masterpiece. I just stood to the side, watching her with absolute coldness, flashing a cruel, villainous smile. Didn't CEO Sterling pride herself on being a massive clean freak? How is it that you can't even wash a single rug properly? Lucius Davenport is sitting inside a prison cell operating a sewing machine, and you are out here washing rugs. You two really are a match made in heaven. Hearing Lucius's name, Seraphina's frantic scrubbing violently froze. She gritted her teeth so hard the grinding was completely audible. Tears swirled furiously in her red eye sockets, but she forcefully refused to let them fall. She didn't utter a single, pathetic syllable. She just went back to scrubbing aggressively, as if trying to wash away the absolute stupidity of her past 3 years all at once. 3 a.m. A massive hurricane suddenly erupted outside the window. Torrential rain poured down like a relentless waterfall. Booming thunder violently ripped right through the night sky. I was lying on my gargantuan, genuine leather king-sized bed when a violently excruciating cramp suddenly exploded deep in my stomach. It felt like 10,000 rusty steel blades were having a wild blender party inside my intestines. This was the chronic disease I had contracted 3 years ago, getting a severe perforated ulcer from drinking myself half to death at endless business dinners, just to secure massive investments for Seraphina. Freezing cold sweat instantly soaked straight through my expensive silk pajamas. I curled up into a tight little ball, clutching my stomach with an absolute death grip. I clamped my jaw shut, but painful, agonizing groans still slipped from my throat. Suddenly, the heavy bedroom door was gently pushed open. Seraphina walked in carrying a glass of warm water, arriving for her mandatory 2-hour routine bed check, only to see me curled up on the bed, rolling around in absolute, blinding agony. The glass in her hand hit the floor with a deafening smash, shattering into a million pieces. "Caelen, what's wrong?" She threw herself at the side of the bed, staring in utter panic at my face, which was currently the pale color of a ghost. "My meds, the drawer, is empty." I managed to squeeze out a few pathetic words, my blurred vision fading in and out of total blackness. Seraphina frantically rummaged through the nightstand drawers. They were completely empty, and worse, the estate's private doctor just so happened to have taken leave tonight to visit his hometown. "Hold on. I'll go buy the medicine. Just hold on. I'll be right back." Seraphina violently shot up to her feet, not even bothering to grab a winter coat. She sprinted straight out of the bedroom like an absolute maniac. Outside was an absolute, raging monsoon. Lightning flashed blindingly white, and thunder roared. The estate was located in a highly secluded, wealthy area. The nearest 24-hour pharmacy was a solid 3 kilometers away, and the car keys were all strictly held by my bodyguards. The bodyguards had rotated shifts to sleep, so she literally couldn't find a single awake person to help her. Driven by pure desperation, Seraphina didn't even grab an umbrella. She dove headfirst into the pitch-black, torrential storm. The brutal hurricane winds whipped the freezing rain, lashing aggressively across her face like a razor-sharp cat-o'-nine tails. She was wearing these terribly cheap, oversized flats, sprinting like a maniac down the muddy mountain road. Suddenly, she rolled her ankle. She face-planted right into a massive puddle. Her knees scraped wide open, and blood just started pouring out. But she dragged herself back up and kept pushing forward. Her brain was completely consumed by the image of me, curled up in absolute, agonizing pain. 1 hour later, the bedroom door was violently thrown open again. Seraphina looked like a literal drowned rat fished fresh out of a hurricane. There wasn't a single dry inch on her entire body. Her hair was completely plastered to her face, dripping everywhere. Muddy water just poured down her pant legs, creating a total mess on the floor. Her hands were fiercely clutching a plastic bag against her chest. Inside were a few boxes of stomach meds. "I got the meds. Caelen, please, take the medicine." Her legs completely gave out, and she crashed heavily onto her knees right next to my bed. Her violently shaking fingers ripped open the box. She popped out 2 capsules, grabbed the half glass of warm water left on the nightstand, and carefully brought it right to my lips. "Open your mouth. I'm begging you. Please, just swallow the medicine." She was sobbing and pleading at the exact same time. Her freezing cold fingers gently brushed against my lips. They felt like actual ice cubes. Fighting through the excruciating pain, I guided her hand and finally swallowed the pills. The warm water washed down my throat and settled into my stomach. That agonizing, twisting cramp finally started to fade. I collapsed back against the pillows, completely drained and gasping for air. Suddenly, a golden, furry head popped into view. Waffles had sneaked into the room at some point. He just stared at the completely soaked, violently shivering Seraphina. A low, sympathetic whimper escaped his throat. Waffles walked right up to her, stuck out his tongue, and gently licked her mud-splattered cheek. Seraphina froze completely. For the past few days, Waffles had treated her with absolute, unrelenting hostility, refusing to let her touch a single hair on his head. But in this exact moment, the pure instinct of an animal sensed her genuine heart. She had literally risked her life to prove herself. Seraphina just threw her arms around the big dog's neck. All the grievance and regret she had suppressed for so long erupted like a volcano. She broke down completely, wailing from pure heartbreak. The medicine finally kicked in, and my consciousness slowly began to fade. Seraphina didn't even dare to leave. She stayed exactly like that, still in her soaking wet clothes, slumped over the edge of the bed, keeping watch over me. Who knows how much time passed? The storm outside gradually weakened. I slowly opened my eyes. The war raging inside my stomach had completely declared a ceasefire. My gaze shifted downward slightly. Seraphina had fallen dead asleep, just slumped over the side of the mattress. Her eyebrows were tightly knitted together. Water droplets still clung stubbornly to her eyelashes. Her face was so pale, she looked completely drained of life. The massive scrapes on her knees were still oozing blood, staining those pathetic gray servant pants. I stared quietly at the side of her face. Some rock-hard corner of my heart suddenly let out a microscopic cracking sound. Once the thrill of revenge totally faded away, what surged up was this wild, unnameable, intense frustration. I slowly reached out my hand, my fingertips hovering right in the thin air, but ultimately, I didn't touch her hair. Buzz, buzz. The custom phone hidden under my pillow suddenly vibrated violently. In the dead silence of the night, the sound was piercingly loud. I aggressively yanked the phone out and smashed my thumb onto the fingerprint scanner. The screen lit up. It was an anonymous multimedia message with absolutely no sender ID. The exact millisecond I clicked the message open, my pupils contracted to the size of pinholes. The blood in my veins literally felt like it froze solid in that instant. The background of the photo was the exact floor-to-ceiling window of this very bedroom in the Vance estate. Dead center in the frame was the back of Seraphina's head as she slept soundly right by my bed. And right on the back of her skull was a blindingly bright crimson sniper laser dot. Right below the photo was an incredibly short, chilling line of text. Young Master Vance. Lucius Davenport broke out of jail. The game has just begun. I launched myself like an absolute missile toward the edge of the bed, grabbed Seraphina violently by the shoulder, and tackled her brutally to the floor. Crack. A bullet from a silenced sniper rifle instantly shattered the bulletproof glass window. The projectile buried itself deep into the wall, smoking with an aggressive white vapor. I shielded Seraphina beneath my body, my eyes turning completely glacial. Assassin, locked down the entire estate. The bodyguards outside the door instantly smashed their way in. Fully strapped, they formed a human shield around us in seconds. Seraphina was shaking so violently she was basically vibrating, clutching the corner of my shirt with an absolute death grip. By the next morning, the crisis was temporarily suspended. Every single inch of the Vance estate perimeter was crawling with hidden snipers, but Seraphina, desperate to win over my dog, Waffles, absolutely insisted on trekking 10 kilometers to a high-end pet store just to buy his favorite treats. I wasn't taking any chances, so I dispatched 2 top-tier shadow bodyguards to secretly tail her. Half an hour later, I was back at my desk, deep in a pile of paperwork. Suddenly, my custom-encrypted phone went completely insane, vibrating right off the desk. An unknown video call request flashed across the screen. I smashed the accept button, and the screen instantly flared to life. Lucius's twisted, psychotic face dominated the frame. "Young Master Vance. Long time no see, huh?" He cackled, the sound absolutely sickening. He violently whipped the camera around. Inside what looked like an abandoned chemical plant, Seraphina was tied to a rusted iron pillar with thick, massive ropes. Her face was battered and covered in crimson stains, and her gray-maid uniform was torn to shreds. A plastic shopping bag lay spilled at her feet, scattering Waffles' premium beef jerky all over the dirty concrete. Worse, my 2 elite Vance bodyguards were slumped on the ground in giant pools of blood, their status completely unknown. "Caelen, leave me! Save yourself!" Seraphina screamed hoarsely at the camera, her tears mixing with the red streaks pouring down her face. Smack! Lucius brutally backhanded her across the jaw. Half of Seraphina's face instantly swelled up like a balloon. Crimson fluid dripped from the corner of her mouth. I leaned back in my leather chair, staring at the screen with an absolute poker face. But underneath the desk, my knuckles were bone white from gripping the armrests, so hard I could have crushed them. "Caelen Vance, does your heart ache?" Lucius whipped out a tactical dagger that flashed with a cold, terrifying gleam, aggressively pressing it right against Seraphina's jugular. "Sign the corporate equity transfer agreement right this second. Hand over total control of the Vance Mega Corporation, or else I will slaughter this little brat right now and feed what's left to the dogs." His eyes were completely unhinged, a bloodshot web of exploding veins. The guy was totally out of his mind. I let out a dark, freezing laugh, staring back at him like he was already a dead man. "Lucius Davenport," I growled softly. "Do you seriously think you're walking out of the capital city alive?" I hung up the call with zero hesitation and violently slammed my palm onto the massive red panic button on my desk. "Shadow Squad, full deployment. Activate the God's Eye system. Hijack all 30,000 security cameras in the entire city. And do it in less than 3 seconds." The gigantic wall of monitors in my office instantly lit up, cascading with a massive matrix of code. The AI facial recognition system went into absolute overdrive. Red dots flashed wildly across the digital map before deadlocking onto the city's dark outskirts. Coordinates X421, Y633. The abandoned Red Star chemical plant. I snatched my pure black, custom handgun from the desk, taking massive, furious strides toward the rooftop helipad. The hurricane winds roared around me. 3 heavy-duty military attack choppers aggressively lifted off the tarmac. Their propellers tore the clouds to shreds, carrying a suffocating aura of absolute annihilation as we rushed toward the edge of the city. 15 minutes later, the choppers hovered menacingly above the rusted chemical plant. Fully geared shadow bodyguards dropped like streaks of black lightning. They rattled down the tactical ropes and hit the concrete with an explosive thud. Their combat boots crunched over the debris, beating out a terrifying, synchronized rhythm of absolute doom. I stepped up, raised my right leg, and kicked the massive rusted iron doors completely off their hinges. The 2 insanely heavy doors collapsed inward with an earthquake-like crash, kicking up a massive, blinding storm of dust. Gripping my weapon in one hand, I walked through the smoke like the god of war descending to earth, radiating a suffocating aura of absolute demise. Lucius shivered so hard you could hear his teeth chattering. The dagger in his hand almost clattered to the floor. "You! How the hell did you get here so fast?" The dozen or so armed goons surrounding him scrambled, just about to raise their weapons and fight back. But my shadow bodyguards pulled their triggers with zero hesitation. In exactly 3 seconds flat, they accurately blew out the wrists and kneecaps of every single thug in the room. Screams of absolute agony echoed endlessly against the metal walls. The dozen goons collapsed into pools of red liquid, rolling on the floor like maniacs. Seeing this, Lucius's legs completely gave out. He dropped to his knees with a pathetic thud. I walked right up to him, staring down like an apex predator at the absolute top of the food chain. I raised my tactical boot and brutally stomped down dead center on his kneecap. A sickening, bone-crunching crack echoed crisply through the dead silence of the room. My leg. Lucius let out a horrific scream that sounded exactly like a pig being slaughtered. He rolled frantically around on the dust-covered floor, but I kept my boot firmly planted on his shattered knee, mercilessly grinding it in. I snatched a thick document folder from a bodyguard behind me and violently smashed it right into Lucius's formerly arrogant face. The papers scattered everywhere, and every single page was stamped with blindingly red official seals from international law enforcement. Money laundering to the tune of 500 million, smuggling strictly prohibited contraband, and hiring shadowy assassins straight off the dark web. I coldly read out his ultimate doom. Lucius Davenport. This massive mountain of ironclad evidence guarantees you will rot at the absolute bottom of a maximum security cell. You won't even get the luxury of operating a prison sewing machine this time around. Get ready to face the music." Seraphina was still chained up to that iron pillar, gasping desperately for air like a fish out of water. She stared in shock at my godlike descent into the grim warehouse. Her tears completely broke the dam, pouring down her face. Lucius just stared at the documents scattered all over the floor, his face the color of dead dirt. He was completely, absolutely finished. But suddenly, an explosive, wild animal glare erupted deep in Lucius's eyes. He violently whipped out a pitch-black, highly toxic blade right out of his tactical boot. Riding on a final, desperate burst of adrenaline, he sprang up like a rabid chihuahua, lunging straight for my chest. "Caelen Vance, I am dragging you straight down to the underworld with me." The distance was way too close. This insane plot twist happened way too fast. Just as I was raising my arm to block and counter, a gray blur suddenly tackled me aggressively right from the side. Seraphina, fueled by some unknown, ungodly burst of strength, had literally snapped the massive heavy ropes that had torn her delicate skin raw. She threw herself right in front of me with zero hesitation, throwing her arms wide open. The sickening slash of a blade piercing right through her echoed through the massive, empty factory. Seraphina's fragile body instantly went terrifyingly rigid. Dark, toxic crimson fluid immediately stained her gray servant uniform. My bodyguard's boomstick spit out roaring tongues of fiery justice, instantly turning Lucius into a piece of human Swiss cheese. Lucius's eyes went totally wide, and he flopped down stiffly into a massive puddle of red, checking out of this world with his eyes wide open in ultimate, pathetic defeat. I desperately reached out and caught Seraphina as she slowly collapsed backward into my arms. Warm, crimson life fluid splattered right across my face, instantly turning my own eyes totally bloodshot. "Seraphina!" My eyes nearly ripped right out of their sockets in sheer panic. I clamped both of my hands frantically over the deep wound on her chest, which was pumping out that red fluid endlessly. Seraphina's beautiful face was completely, terrifyingly drained of all its color, but the corner of her mouth somehow pulled up into a tragic, absolutely heartbreaking smile. "Caelen, I don't owe you anything anymore." Her arms dropped limply down to her sides, and she plunged straight into a complete, absolute coma. "Get the medical chopper here, right now." I quickly scooped her up into my arms and sprinted out of that factory, letting out an agonizing roar like a truly wounded beast. The rescue chopper roared high into the sky, speeding like a bullet towards City No. 1 Hospital. City No. 1 Hospital. Top floor, emergency operating room. The glaring red status light was so blindingly bright it induced sheer panic. I was sitting there on the freezing cold waiting bench, completely covered in red stains, with my hands shaking totally uncontrollably. From the far end of the hallway came the frantic, rapid clicking of dog paws. Waffles had totally slipped out of his handler's leash and sprinted right up to me. He gently sniffed at my trembling hands, which were entirely coated in crimson. A tragic, heartbreaking, whimpering cry escaped his little throat. Waffles stuck his soft tongue out and gently licked the red marks right off the back of my hand. I pulled Waffles into a suffocatingly tight, desperate hug. "Waffles, is she going to game over on me?" I buried my face entirely into his warm golden fur. Hot tears randomly, unexpectedly smashed against the cold hospital floor. 3 long years of bitter humiliation, absolute blinding rage, and pure, unadulterated hatred. In that exact millisecond, when Seraphina completely and unhesitatingly took that toxic blade from me, all of it was totally and utterly pulverized into dust. In the harsh face of absolute life and death, all my glorious plans for revenge felt so incredibly ridiculous. I hated her for 3 whole years. But in this exact, agonizing moment, I realized I absolutely could not accept a reality where she just disappeared from my world forever. The heavy doors to the operating room were finally shoved open. The head surgeon ripped off his surgical mask and let out a massively long, heavy sigh of relief. "Chairman Vance, the blade miraculously missed her heart by barely half an inch. The nasty toxins have been fully and safely neutralized. The patient is officially out of the danger zone." I violently shot straight up to my feet, but because I stood up way too incredibly fast, my vision went totally black for a terrifying second. Waffles immediately used his sturdy little body to aggressively prop up my trembling calf. "Move her to the ultimate VIP suite right now. Use the absolute best medicine on the entire planet." I took massive, urgent strides into her hospital room. The sterile smell of disinfectant was aggressively sharp. Seraphina was lying completely silently on the pristine hospital bed, wearing a clear oxygen mask. Her incredibly long, Beautiful eyelashes fluttered slightly, and she slowly, weakly opened her eyes. Seeing me sitting right there by the side of the bed, a sudden flash of pure panic crossed her tired eyes. "Caelen, are you hurt?" My eye sockets were burning red hot. I tightly clenched my jaw and didn't say a single damn word. I just reached deep into the inner pocket of my custom-tailored suit jacket and slowly pulled out a battered, old velvet jewelry box. Snap! The tiny box popped open. A blindingly brilliant, flawless diamond ring sat quietly inside. This was the exact same engagement ring from 3 long years ago. It was the exact ring I had bought with my entire life savings, the one I never actually got the chance to give her. Trembling, I gently grabbed Seraphina's pale, freezing left hand and slowly, carefully slid it right onto her ring finger. The fit? It was absolutely flawless. Seraphina's eyes went wide, completely stunned by what was happening. Tears poured from her eyes like a broken faucet. "Caelen, just shut up," she choked out through her sobs. "Focus on recovering." My voice was incredibly weak, but my tone was far more gentle than it had ever been in my entire life. "Your life was saved by me," I whispered. "So don't even dream about escaping me in this lifetime." Right on cue, Waffles wagged his tail like an absolute maniac and squeezed himself closer to us. He lifted his fluffy front paw and with pinpoint accuracy, placed it right on top of our intertwined hands. Woof! Waffles let out a wildly happy bark, instantly doing excited spin moves right in the middle of the quiet hospital room. Seraphina broke through her heavy tears and actually laughed out loud, flipping her hand over to hold mine in an absolute death grip. The morning sunlight outside finally pierced through the dark clouds, spilling warmly across the hospital bed and filling the room with a cozy, comforting heat. But right at that exact, picture-perfect moment, a chaotic burst of rapid, heavy footsteps echoed violently from outside the door. Thaddeus practically smashed his way into the room, his face looking as grim as humanly possible. "Chairman Vance, we have a massive situation." He urgently handed over a top-secret file folder, his voice dropping down to an absolute, dead-serious whisper. Right before Lucius Davenport went down, he successfully transmitted the Vance Corporation's absolute core secrets to a highly mysterious offshore account. The soft, warm smile on my face instantly evaporated, my eyes snapped back up, suddenly turning colder than a frozen glacier. An even more catastrophic, world-ending storm had just officially raised its curtains. The end. Hey guys! If you love this wild ride, make sure to smash that like button and subscribe for more.